right, I'm guessing I'm supposed to start pretty soon. Good morning, afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the April session of the ChicagoLand SharePoint Users Group. I'm your host, Mark Vogt. We've got a couple other people, Mike Blumenthal, also participating today. I'm glad that you guys could make it to another session. We're looking forward to the things that we're going to be talking about today. Let's take a peek at the agenda. Typically, we talk about recent news from around the SharePoint ecosystem, followed by big picture stuff, followed by upcoming events, and then we dive into at least some cool new stuff. It's a little bit quiet today here in April. We've got only one topic to talk about. There's a lot of other cool stuff in the news that's more noteworthy. And as time permits, there is the BYOP, the Bring Your Own Problem. Jumping into big picture stuff while everybody's still getting online seemed to make sense to us today. That way, if you come in a little bit late because you're getting your equipment going, stuff like that, all you've done is miss a little bit of big picture stuff, but not the news and the events around and the items. We always like to talk about this at each of our sessions, helping our members understand that SharePoint does have a purpose, that it is an anchor technology inside your organization, and it should be less about gaining adoption and more about specifying how SharePoint actually gets used. There's a lot of merit to that. Where SharePoint fits is, it's in the realm of individual productivity tools. You've got Outlook and Office. If you have, at the highest level, enterprise productivity tools, which is ERP systems, and somewhere in between is that massive realm called group productivity tools, and that's where SharePoint actually literally has virtually no equal. It's SharePoint and learning how to use it. Once you understand your group processes, then SharePoint becomes the ideal tool. So please keep that in mind as you continue working with SharePoint. It's a group anchor technology, and you're trying to find out where that fits. A new big picture slide, or a revision of it, is talking about the 4 stages of collaboration maturity. Empowering technologies empower or improve what you should already be doing. That said, SharePoint is an empowering technology. What does it empower? It empowers collaboration. And in any organization, there are basically 4 major steps that the organization goes through as it matures towards collaborating better and better and better. It always starts off as at the communication level. There, SharePoint is going to be competing against email and a wealth of other technologies, but it still actually does a very good job of centralizing it and organizing it. The next step of collaboration maturity is beginning to share information, share files. And there, SharePoint OneDrive provides you with centralized file sharing, versioning, lots of other functionality that's completely superior to email. Lots of companies, lots of organizations are in that sharing mode. They've taken that first step, but it's not the best first step. They're using email, they're using file servers, they're maybe using some other kind of cloud-based storage, and then they find out that it becomes more difficult to share that. It's not just about putting a file server up in the cloud someplace. The next step in collaboration maturity is actually learning to talk about tasking. It's not just about sharing messages back and forth or information back and forth, but it's the actual assignment and the management of tasks that are all aligned toward a common goal. Lots of organizations have not yet even truly reached this step. But once they do, SharePoint is absolutely the tool that makes collaboration explode. And once that takes off, the very last step, this idea of tracking any and all information in dashboards, every conceivable kind of entity, you're beyond messages, now you're into tasks, but with SharePoint, you can begin also tracking risks, issues, questions, tests, deliverables, you name it, everything can go into a SharePoint website. When you have reached that stage of collaboration, you're pretty much at the peak, at the top, and you are deriving all the possible value you could out of collaborating with you and with all of the people in your organization, no matter what part of the planet they're actually on. So keep that in mind. One of the things you need to do is understand where your organization actually is in this 4-step maturity path, or this road, and then understand what the next step needs to be and how you're going to be trying to get there. Recent news is the next topic. We're going to talk about things around the SharePoint ecosystem. And like we would have expected, springtime starts to wake up here in the Chicagoland area. April saw Forrester 2017, their wave diagram, kind of the competitor to the Magic Quadrant, actually put SharePoint in as a leader in the enterprise content management space, neck and neck with IBM and I think only one other competitor. There's a link that will take you there. We have a slide coming up next that will tell you about it. Oddly enough, Microsoft announces support for the pound symbol and the % character actually in file names and folder names in SharePoint OC. That's our secret code for on cloud. SharePoint Online we call on cloud. SharePoint on premise we call OP. It's a lot cleaner way to try to keep track between on premise and online. It's either OP or it's OC. So interesting that Microsoft is taking this step. It'll be interesting to see in the fall what actually happens when file names and folder names start carrying those characters. Is it going to be better or is it actually going to be worse? But it is an interesting thing that they put a lot of thought into this. There was also some recent updates on the SharePoint product roadmap, showing some other functionality that they want to try to get into. SharePoint 2016 has a new KB patch for April, and there's a link that will take you there. My favorite, Microsoft updates the Power Apps and what I like to call Power Flow. Don't know why they don't just call it Power Flow. There's new integrations. There's an improved end user experience. There's the ability to work with larger SharePoint lists. I'm told there's even better performance, which is what we really need to see in Power Apps. And they started embedding Power Apps inside Power BI dashboards. I'm hoping what they see next is they need to be able to put Power BI dashboards inside our Power Apps. Then we've got this fantastic 1-2 punch of creating mobile applications that contain even that analytics facet, that analytics functionality. Watch for updates on that in upcoming sessions where we're still trying to get Power BI dashboards inside Power Apps. Last but absolutely not least, coming up in May is the SharePoint Virtual Summit on May 16th. More on that from Michael Blumenthal when he talks in just a minute or two. I mentioned that Forrester put Microsoft and SharePoint at the top of the ECM, their diagram, their wave diagram. Here's where we actually see Microsoft being a leader in terms of strategy and in terms of their current offering. And this is only treating SharePoint as an ECM tool. We all know it's more than that. So just that subset of functionality, Microsoft or SharePoint's ECM functionality, was sufficient to actually put it up here alongside OpenText and Content Suite and other pure play ECM technologies. That's actually really impressive. I was just wanted to share that with you guys. That it's indicative that Microsoft continues to actually take SharePoint and lead in a number of different areas by combining all of these technologies, all of these functionalities into one single platform, one single suite that we know as SharePoint. Upcoming events, looking a little bit further ahead. We've got the rest of April. SP TechCon happened earlier in the month. Today is the ChicagoLand session. We've got April 17th to 20th is a SharePoint Fest in DC. On May 17th, we've got our own session again. We've got the SharePoint Virtual Summit May 16th, along with some other goodies there that I'll let Michael Blumenthal talk about. There's going to be a party. Last but not least, we've got our 4th annual SharePoint Saturday in the Chicago suburbs on May 20th, and it's getting bigger and cooler every single year that these guys have been putting it on. So mark that in your calendars. You want to make sure that you actually find a way to even spend half a day on your Saturday there. It is going to be time very well spent. I will ask Elizabeth if she can open up the chat panel, that if there are people that have any other events they want to share with us today, let me know, and I'll give you I'll shout it out. I'll just be watching the chat to see if there's anything else going on. At this point, it's time for me to hand over to Michael Blumenthal. So I'm going to go to mute, and Michael Blumenthal is going to take over the screen. Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Let me share my screen, and there we go. Now, hopefully everyone can see Office 365 News, Retirements, Community, and Message Center. If anyone, looks great. Thank you very much. So, hello everyone. I'm Michael Blumenthal. I am an Office 365 MVP, as well as an Office 365 principal engineer at a local media and broadcast company. So I live and breathe the Office 365 every day. Today, the things I want to cover are some product retirements, the community events that Mark mentioned, and then I also want to talk about the admin message center in Office 365. Let's start with the product retirements. Yeah, here we go. So Microsoft recently announced Access apps are going to be retired. My impression is that probably not many of you have actually used Access apps, but if you are, they're going away in SharePoint Online. So wow. Next month, pardon me?
I said, wow, that's actually really interesting.
So next month, after next month, you won't be able to create any new ones. And after April of next year, existing Access apps will stop working. So this is a good time to start looking at transition options. For example, considering how you might move them to Power Apps. I co-run an Office 365 adoption user group. We had a meeting earlier in the month, and we did a quick survey of just 20 people in the room, and no one there had actually used Access apps. And for those of you who are not familiar with Access apps, this is a way to take an Access database and publish it into a SharePoint site. But apparently it wasn't getting much adoption in SharePoint Online, as well as I think in the back architecturally, I think it may be a bit hard for Microsoft to support at scale, but that's just a guess on my part. But anyway, so they're going away. They'll still be around in SharePoint on-premise for a while, but you should start looking at opportunities to replace them with some other supported technology, and quite possibly Power Apps. Moving along to the next one, business connectivity services came up in a discussion for something we're thinking about using it for recently, again in SharePoint Online. And I started asking around about, I haven't heard much about BCS lately. Is it still alive? Is it still a viable technology? Well, it is still alive, but I found from a discussion on Tech Community, and I can dig up the link for that, share that later, but in the Tech Community discussion, people had asserted that BCS is not an area of investment for Microsoft currently, that there is no product team spending time on building it out or improving it anymore. But as other people have pointed, the counter argument to that, I should say, is that it may simply be considered a mature technology that's stable and doesn't need any work. So the future of BCS is debatable, is what I'm going to call that, debatable, because there's not been any official word from Microsoft that it is dead. So don't assume it is, but it's also doesn't seem like it's getting any love or attention. So from my perspective, if I'm a solution architect, I'm going to be looking very carefully and seeing, are there other solutions that would better, or not necessarily better, but an alternative solution architecture that would address the same need. So BCS is usually used to bring backend data into SharePoint as a SharePoint list, for example, often from, say, SQL Azure or something. And so that's not quite the same thing that Power Apps or Flow does. But if you look at what you're doing, you're bringing that data in so you can display it to the user in some way. So perhaps a better solution might be to, wherever you're storing that data, make a client-side web call from a custom SPFX web part, or possibly, if Power Apps can do web calls, again, use some sort of web call to get the data and display that to the user. So so I would look for a different solution architecture, because to me it's very unclear about the future of BCS, and I would be hesitant to bet on it. But again, I'm going to leave that one open to debate, because there are people who are quite certain that it's still alive and well. Moving on to Active Directory, Azure Active Directory. recently, I believe it's the 13th of this month, the previous AD to Azure AD sync applications, the one called DirSync and the one called Azure AD Sync, are no longer supported. And so you should have been already running Azure AD Connect for a while. And if you're not, it's definitely time to upgrade. One of the other retirement announcements that Microsoft made is not in Office 365 at all, but it is one of the open source code repositories that Microsoft had historically supported, and that is CodePlex. Microsoft has announced the retirement of CodePlex. They're going to they're going to stop allowing contributions to CodePlex, and they're going to basically make the repository read-only at some point into the future. You can go to codeplex.com and read all about it there. The recommendation is move things to GitHub. And then finally, while we're on the topic of retirement, I'm going to remind people that InfoPath and SharePoint Designer are still dead, that they've not seen any investment for a while, and they will not be getting any more investment from the product teams. And so I would be very cautious about using them. And again, that is what Power Apps and Flow, for the most part, are intended to replace. And so one of the things I would encourage us as a user group to do is, as you discover resources for learning Power Apps and Flow, please share those among the group. I know from in my day job, Power Apps and Flow have come up as a technology or a tool set that we definitely want to learn because of the capabilities it enables and how that can offer power users ways to do business process automation and gives us tools without having to look at third-party solutions. Now I'm going to change gears. Enough about retirements. Let's go on to community events. Mark mentioned a number of these. The one that I want to point out as upcoming is May 16th, the SharePoint Virtual Summit. Not only is Microsoft doing the webcast of the Virtual Summit, but again, my user group, the Office 365 Adoption User Group, the one that I co-lead, is having a viewing party. So I invite all of you to come to this viewing party. Please register using that bit.ly link. You'll see it takes you to our meetup page. We are getting together at the Microsoft office in Downers Grove. We'll put the webcast on the big screen. We'll have pizza, we'll have giveaways, and after the webcast, we'll have discussion and talk about the announcements that we're expecting to hear. So this is Microsoft's opportunity to lay out the roadmap of the upcoming things that they're doing in SharePoint and OneDrive. And I expect to hear something about the future of publishing sites. So that's what I'm hoping to hear about is some announcements about the future of publishing sites. But whatever they announce, we'll discuss it at this viewing party. So please register for that and spread the word about it.
Cool.
Also, as Mark mentioned, May 20th, SharePoint Saturday Chicago Suburbs. It's free. It's a full day of SharePoint education. I'm going to be there talking about Office 365. I think I've got a morning session, and I'm providing an overview of Office 365. So please come to that. And then, again, looking farther ahead, all the way to September, registration is open for Microsoft Ignite, which will be in Orlando. And so that's Microsoft's premier education conference for the year for everything other than development. For development, there's build. Last year at Ignite 2016, SharePoint topics represented the vast majority of the sessions as well. So it's a thing not to be missed. Now I'm going to switch gears again and talk about the Office 365 Admin Message Center. So I don't have a poll slide here, but if you can use the chat window to just let me know how many of you are admins or have admin rights to your Office 365 tenant. Well, I see one response saying not me. So the interesting thing about the admin message center is that this is where Microsoft notifies you of all the things coming to Office 365 to your specific tenant. Now, they can't necessarily tell you when those things will land in your tenant, but they'll tell you what's coming to your tenant in particular. The only people who have access to this, however, is the global tenant admins. So if you are a global tenant admin and you want to share this information with other people in your organization, in particular outside of IT, you can either wait for Microsoft to eventually provide other kinds of access to this, or you can use existing APIs to extract this into a spreadsheet that you can share. And that's exactly what I've done in my organization. Is I went and wrote a little bit of PowerShell. Let me show you that. So with some help from some resources out on the web already, I got this little bit of PowerShell, and I used it to create a CSV file, a comma-separated values file, which you can then open in Excel and then format nicely. And using this, I was able to create a spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet then I can mark up and comment about and make indications of, okay, here's an announcement from Microsoft, here's who needs to know about it, here's any impact on our users, and so forth. So I can use that as a governance tool and distribute this information to other people in the company who, whether they're business side or IT, but not global tenant admins, need this to help manage and govern the Office 365 environment. So going back here, one caveat here is this API. This API is not the latest API, and so this script will need an update when I switch it over to the newer service management API. But I'm waiting for the person who wrote the sample that I based this on to update theirs, and they've said they would. So when they update their sample, I'll update this. But in the meantime, this works. And again, it gives me a Excel spreadsheet that I can use to take the latest messages and distribute them to other people in the organization who aren't global tenant admins and who need to know about some of the changes coming to my tenant. If anyone's interested in the PowerShell code, I can provide that to you. I've got it posted in a message on Tech Community as well. And this also goes back to a thing I talked about previously, which is voting up the user voice request for providing read access to Message Center. In lieu of that, this is one of the workarounds. Now with that, I'll leave you with this reminder about the upcoming events, and I'd like to turn it over to Mark or take any questions.
Mike,
I do
thanks
see a
for that.
question that did come in, and for those of you guys that did raise your hand, I did unmute you, so if you guys have anything you'd like to share, feel free to do so.
And I see one question. The question is this PowerShell script? Let me go back to the actual script. Is this executed remotely against the Office 365 environment? Yes, there's obviously no way to actually log into an Office 365 server because it's software as a service. So the PowerShell uses a REST call, a REST API that's at api.admin.microsoft.online to go and get the list of events or Message Center messages. So this is all done remotely. The PowerShell runs on my laptop and uses my Office 365 admin credentials, and actually it uses a credential that is a tenant admin but is not set up with multi-factor authentication. And it goes out and runs this query. So the PowerShell executes on my laptop and talks to the REST APIs that Microsoft publishes.
That makes a lot of sense, Michael. I could see something similar. I've experienced a similar need, that the ability to even submit a help desk ticket requires that you actually have to have admin level access into Office 365, and yet it's the mere mortals that actually need to be able to submit help desk tickets and get a callback inside of 10 minutes, like we're used to seeing when we're a global administrator of our O365 environment.
Now,
I could.
To be clear, there is a granular permission called, I believe it's Service Administrator, that gives you the ability to open service tickets, but there still are some rights, additional rights that come with that may be beyond what you want to give a help desk technician, for example.
I could be trying to leverage some of the code that you've written here, or even the concept that maybe there's a REST API call that could be invoked to actually programmatically submit a help desk ticket without exposing any additional privileges to the mere mortal that needs to submit that help desk ticket. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So there is a service management API, and that's documented on MSDN, as well as that gives you an opportunity, if you have an existing help desk ticketing system, to integrate that ticketing system with the service tickets in Office 365. So that's definitely an integration opportunity.
Have any of the members that are attending today, we have something like 19 people today, this is fantastic. Anybody else that's attending today, have you or your organization actually worked on any kind of a solution like this, where in your Office 365 environment, let's say at the root of your intranet, something like that, there's some little web part of Power Apps, anything like this that allows mere mortals to submit tickets and consume this REST API without actually making them global administrators or providing them with that services administration privilege? Feel free to mention anything during the chat right now. That said, I think I'm going to take over the screen and we're going to continue the next part of the presentation. Mike, thanks as always for a fantastic update on Office 365 and on the virtual summit that's coming up on May 16th. I'm looking forward to that myself. You said that's going to be in the Downers Grove office. So it's a virtual summit, but you're physically attending it because there's no other way to eat pizzas or get prizes.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's a community gathering. We all want to know what Microsoft is going to announce. So we're all getting together at the Microsoft office in Downers Grove, and we're going to watch it together and then talk about it. So please go and register for that. And again, spread the word and let other people know.
Mike, can you remind me how long that summit is expected to last? Is it several hours?
I believe so. If you follow the meetup link, which was bit.ly/all caps SVS17CHI, the meetup page, we've got the agenda up there, and so you've got the time frame out there as well.
Okay. In fact, I might just click on that right now and take a peek. See if it takes us there.
And Mark, before you proceed, there was, Craig, I think, I know he mentioned something about SharePoint Saturday in Addison, but I do believe that was covered. Does anyone else have any commentary about SharePoint Saturday?
I'll just reiterate, it's awesome and you need to be there.
Yes. Look forward to seeing you guys there.
Always a fun time. Like I said, it's the 4th annual one from the people that have been putting this together. And every year it keeps getting better. We're starting to make a name for ourselves in the ChicagoLand area, that even people in the Minneapolis area are thinking that they want to come down for this particular Saturday. It's just a fun time to be in the ChicagoLand area. Thanks again, Mike. Let's take a look and proceed with the next part. Cool new stuff for this particular session. Last month, I wanted to continue working on the SharePoint framework. We all get busy once in a while. I found myself working for the last couple of weeks down south in an environment where they were not ready yet for Power Apps and any kind of an Power Apps-based solution, but they needed to be able to automate site provisioning. So the challenge was how to create a site provisioning solution using only SharePoint Designer, and specifically by leveraging a new action that came out in 2013 called the Call HTTP Web Service action. So what we're going to spend the next couple of minutes doing is actually going over the steps that it takes to use that particular web service. Even though, like Michael said, we're doing it inside SharePoint Designer, we need to be cognizant that Microsoft doesn't want to support this anymore. Right here, right now, the state of the other technologies, the other platforms that are available to us, sometimes are not up to the challenge of the things that we need to accomplish. So that's what we're going to try to tackle. Let me end this slideshow and start the next one, please. We're going to go through some slides, and then we're going to go through a demo. I'm going to move very, very quickly. These slides don't need to spend a lot of time on them. It's all about building a site provisioning solution using Designer 2013 and that action that I mentioned. The challenge is that SharePoint is supposed to be a self-empowering technology, but lots of people lock it down. Once they lock it down, they want to be able to automatically provision sites. They don't want their admins doing it, but they need to have some level of automation that involves approval as well. With SharePoint on-premise, this could be done using event receivers and the server-side API that was available to us. But in the cloud, OC, that kind of a solution isn't available anymore. The solution is this Call HTTP web service, which allows a SharePoint Designer workflow to actually make a REST call. Just the same way Michael's PowerShell script could sit and make a REST call, we can actually make REST calls as well from the workflow. But it does take a little bit of work to teach that action how to use the appropriate parameters. The challenge then is that the documentation on how to configure this action is poor at best. That's just stating fact. The articles published by all various sources try very, very hard, but they either copy MSDN and they actually have flaws themselves. The end result is that so many of them actually still end up lead to frustrating situations, and we're going to try to fix that today. The solution, we're going to start with the MSDN documentation. It does appear the most accurate, specifically their REST API documentation that's all about JavaScript and JSON. Then we're going to look for clues inside that JavaScript and that JSON for clues on how to translate or transform the constructs that are specified there into what I'll call SharePoint Designer speak. In other words, how are we going to make what they demand, what the REST API demands, how are we going to do that inside our SharePoint Designer action? We're going to configure that workflow to be able to execute app steps then using elevated privileges. We're going to add some additional logging techniques that you'll see that are just some good practices about SharePoint Designer while it's still here. And the result is going to be a pretty straightforward solution for automating site provisioning. Let's jump in. In SharePoint Designer 2013, when you actually go to get the Call HTTP web service, if you were to put that action into a temporary workflow just to inspect it, what you end up with is this rather vague looking little beast that says, I've got to come up with a this variable. I've got to come up with a request. I've got to come up with a response. I've got to come up with response headers. And oh yeah, I've got to come up with a response code. But they don't tell you what those things look like. And therein lies the challenge. Some of the articles that are out there do a fabulous job of talking about it. But like I said, they get one or two little things wrong. What we will find ourselves using is the REST API reference, this particular one, complete basic operations using the 2013 REST endpoint. If we look inside that article, eventually we will see an example on how to create a site in JavaScript, a site meaning a website. And the trick here is to look at how they want to pass information into this AJAX call, that in the JSON bundle, the payload they call it, you end up seeing a bunch of braces. Those braces represent things called dictionaries. And there's one dictionary on the outside here that doesn't even have a name. Inside it is a dictionary called parameters. It does have a name. Inside that is another series of variables, one of which is another dictionary that very specifically must be called __ metadata. And then you can put information inside there that follows this particular format. There's also another dictionary called headers that carries a bunch of information, and then there's some final variables. We have to take seriously that these are actually specifications, not suggestions for what that REST API call needs to have in order to be satisfied. So we use this as our clue to formulate what needs to happen inside SharePoint Designer. The other thing that we need to do in SharePoint Designer is that we cannot even execute this particular action unless the workflow being treated like an app in SharePoint OC and on cloud, it needs to have elevated privileges in order to generate a website. And there's actually a very good article. The one that's specified here does a great job of showing you how to create a workflow with elevated privileges using the SharePoint 2013 workflow platform. I'm not going to dive into a lot of detail here because they did such a good job on this article. It was very straightforward. You're going to go into a page, copy and paste one little URL in some place, and you're rocking and rolling. We may come back to that as time permits. Today, though, I'll show you. Inside SharePoint Designer, when you first create your initial, is there a question? Oh, okay, I'll continue. Some best practices about using SharePoint Designer is to leverage stages to actually organize all of your work. You'll see that the word stage up here has started workflow, ramp up, create variables, create dictionaries. If I continue, the rest of this workflow will be broken up into creating dictionaries, processing, ramping down, and completing the workflow. Those names of those stages actually show up in your SharePoint list. They get picked up whenever a particular list item has a workflow operating on it. So it's a really handy feature to give some kind of meaningful title to these so that every time you refresh the list, you end up seeing that status showing up. That status is lifted right from the stage name. So that's why we name these things the way that we do. In the middle of the processing stage, you'll see is the app step, the elevated privilege step. And the trick is going to be to try to feed this app step, to feed this call HTTP web service action with all of the appropriate variables that it's looking for. What it comes down to is this. For the variable called the URL that needs to get passed, it needs to look exactly like you see right here. You're going to pass in the variable that is the current site URL, followed by, which includes a /, and you're going to add _API/web/webinfo/add. There's one other method that can be evoked as well. They're equivalent. I'm using the webinfos add method as the one that I'm going to invoke. This is what is actually passing the actual REST call into the SharePoint engine to be processed. The next thing we need to start creating are the dictionaries, starting with one that's actually called metadata. It has to have that name, and it's going to consist of only one variable called type, whose data type is string, and it contains web info data. It's listed in a number of the articles. But once you have that, you're done building the metadata dictionary. Let's look at the rest that need to be created. The next dictionary that needs to be created, I've called specifically parameters, and I'm convinced at this point, based on the last couple of weeks, it needs to be called parameters. It's actually the most complex dictionary. It contains a variable which is also another dictionary called __metadata, which points at the metadata dictionary. So we have a dictionary inside a dictionary so far. Also inside this parameters dictionary is a URL passed as a string, which is where you're going to put it, the title of what you're going to call it, a description of what you're going to call it, a language that must be listed as an integer. Do not fall into the trap of making it a number, even though other articles will call it out as a number. It has to be listed as an integer or you will get error messages. The web template is being passed as a string and can actually take one of several values, STS#0, or it can be the GUID, including the braces of whatever web template you care to choose, but it must be one format or the other. Lastly is one called use unique permissions, which has to be set to false no matter what the data type actually is, whether it's string or Boolean. The value that is being looked for by the REST engine is the word false, the value false, not yes or no, which if you made this into a Boolean variable in SharePoint Designer, it would give you a yes or no. It's perfectly okay to not make it Boolean. It's absolutely necessary to get this to be the word false. It has to have the value false. These are some of the things that I learned the hard way just over the last couple of days. The next dictionary that needs to be created is a request dictionary, which just contains a parameter dictionary. The parameter dictionary is the one that just got mentioned up here. So again, following that JSON example, that JavaScript JSON example, we had to have a dictionary nested inside a dictionary, nested inside another dictionary, and this is how we actually achieve that. That's why it looks kind of confusing. Even the articles that people try to post say, you need to do this and need to do this and need to do that. but they don't give you the explanation. The explanation is that ultimately the REST API call is expecting that parameter bundle, that package, that payload to be coming in as a set of nested dictionaries. And luckily, SharePoint Designer lets us build dictionaries very, very straightforwardly. You just have to get the names right, and you have to get the nesting correctly, and then you're rocking and rolling. The next dictionaries that need to be created are for the request dictionary. I think I already covered that one, sorry. And the request headers dictionary, which has to pass in some information about what kind of a request is being made here. The next one is that we need some kind of a response dictionary, and you need to populate it with something. None of the articles actually specify what can work. I just created a simple string variable called temp and put the value temp in there, and it worked perfectly fine. So there's something that absolutely will work for your response dictionary variable. And we need another one called the response headers dictionary. I did the exact same thing. I created one single temporary variable called temp, made it type string, gave it the value temp, and it worked perfectly fine. The only thing that's needed besides that is a response code. The response code itself is actually just a string variable, so you can set it to be anything you want. It's not a dictionary. Ultimately, in order to actually configure this action, you cannot simply click on each of the variables that are highlighted in the action itself, because there's no space in there for a request header variable. Instead, the smart thing to do is to right mouse click on the action, get the context menu, and select properties. You get a properties dialog box for call HTTP web service, and then you can click on each of the variables here, including request header, and you can actually assign explicitly what variable, whether it's a scalar variable or whether it's a dictionary variable, you can assign it to each of the placeholders that exist inside this action. Once you've done that, you have completely configured that action in a way that it's going to consider complete and acceptable. The result is that in this app step, you end up with a variable that points to the web service URL, a variable that points to a request dictionary that contains a parameters dictionary that contains an underscore metadata dictionary and a bunch of other variables. It contains a response dictionary that just has one dummy variable in it. It contains a response headers dictionary that contains a dummy variable, a response code that is just a single scalar variable. And buried inside here, also under the properties, is the request headers dictionary, which means you're ready to actually run this. The rest of the stuff that you see in all of this workflow is just logging to help you step through the process of knowing that everything's actually being generated correctly. If we were to do this, I'll give you guys just a couple of slides. It looked like it was going to be stormy, and I didn't know if I was going to have a good internet connection. I'll do this live in just a moment. Here is my project site request list where I can go and add an item inside here. I'll manually trigger the workflow, but ultimately, you'll actually see the status of that workflow showing here. And the end result is going to be that even for this one, 19D, you ended up with a series of events that happen inside your workflow history, where I have extra little logging that kind of makes a little bundle around it, makes it easier to read. It ramps up, it creates variables, creates dictionaries, it processes. It tells me what the web service REST call is going to be. It actually comes back and tells me that it's got an OK back from the call HTTP web service action, and then it ramps down and completes. The result is that we end up with a nice little website. Let's jump in and actually do this one live and see it work, and then we're going to take a look at the workflow, and that'll actually be it for today's session. If I open up this particular project site, we'll see up here there is no website called 19D, so that's what we're going to go and create. I'm going to click on New. I'm going to fill in the project requester. Jump back in here. For some reason I might have timed out. I have to put my password back in. Hold on. We all know what Office 365 is like. Sometimes it needs to be re-authenticated. I'm going to put in my name,
and Mark,
the project.
Mark, while you're answering that, I wanted to comment. Somebody sent in a comment earlier. Craig did, just when you were talking about web services and SharePoint workflows. He wanted you guys to know they definitely have revolutionized their SharePoint development at AT&T, he said, you know, of course that might be a slight exaggeration, but nonetheless, it is so powerful and it definitely adds so much value to SharePoint. So just wanted to point that out.
Oh, cool. That actually is good news. You can tell I don't type fast under pressure. Here we filled in all of the details that would be required. I have deliberately left out the approval step. That's not the key part here. We all know how to make approval workflows to trigger when there's an item changed event and go and look and see if a value has approved and then it actually performs. I'm doing it manually here because this was still in development and I wanted to show you guys. But this is all that would be required, is that you specify a URL that doesn't have any spaces in there. You give it a name, give it a description. You can either put STS#0 here, or if you knew the GUID, you could put the GUID in here and provide it like that, you know, whatever those long values are. STS#0 is actually the name for our beloved team site template, not STS like some of the articles showed, which is going to trip everybody up. And when we hit save, all this is going to do is add this item to the list. Again, I haven't set my flow up, my workflow to trigger on an item change, just because I'm testing it. This is not in production use. I'm going to go to workflow here, and we're going to start it manually. Here we can see the trigger for starting the workflow. And now it's going to take us back into the list, where if I hit refresh, we'll start to see this working through all of the different statuses. So let's refresh once. It's creating variables already. I'll refresh again. It's creating dictionaries now. And now it's actually processing the item. And since this is the action call, this could take up to a minute. I'm going to hit refresh on this one more time. We all know it takes a minute. It's not any faster when you're programming it than when you're manually doing it. I'll hit refresh one more time. In the meantime, I'm going to go to workflow history and refresh this. We're looking for information that talks about ChicagoLand test 001. You can see we entered the ramp up stage, entered the create variable stage, the dictionary stage, the process stage, and that's where it's actually sitting. It's actually writing the request dictionary and entering the app step and calling the action itself. Let's hit refresh on this one just to see if there's any new items. And we do see we got a response code here. So from here, all the way up to here is the entire life cycle for this particular call. The HTTP web service got called and exited. It wrote a response dictionary. The response came back okay. If I come back here and do a refresh on the list, we should see that it says completed that workflow. And more importantly, if I go back here and hit refresh on PMO home, we should see that new website sitting upside here. And here's our CLSPUG test 001 website. Voila. So what we've done here is actually beat SharePoint Designer. This is the actual SharePoint Designer workflow, along with these different stages that I talked about and the logging that got put in even prior to debugging it. It's always good to have it to put logging inside here. We break it up into stages, creating variables, then creating dictionaries, which are multi-dimensional variables, setting up the actual process, elevating only the action that's required. This is the only part of the workflow that actually has to have the elevated privileges. And if we start to look inside any one of these dictionaries, in particular, the one that's for the request dictionary, we see that that points to parameters. And if we look at the parameters dictionary, the most complicated one of all, we see, I don't think I can resize this, the metadata points to the dictionary, the URL points to all of these other ones. These are the variables that actually need to be populated. This is going to go into a finished slide deck, but so that you guys actually have a good reference to come back and get out of the meetup site and go and request it. The rest of this is all just logging. Again, the app step is only elevated, the only elevated thing. Everything else drops back down to the privileges of whoever was invoking the workflow in the first place. And there you have it, the ability to create a SharePoint Designer-based workflow for provisioning, programmatically provisioning project sites or sites inside SharePoint. Let's see if there's anything else that I wanted to add on to this. Jumping in, I think we're at the, we're at Those are the only references. So those are the things that we wanted to actually cover today. We've got a couple of minutes left. People can either jump off or they can ask questions. It's probably the first time in a few months we actually finished a little early. If people have a bring your own problem that they want to discuss with the group, feel free to use the chat tool to open that up. Or Elizabeth, if you could dare to open the floodgates and turn the phones on. Let's see if we can actually have a audio conversation.
All right, I'm going to unmute all of you guys right now. So for those that don't want to engage, then just please mute your phones.
I want to learn more about the AT&T that was mentioned. Whoever's coming in from AT&T, tell us what you meant by all of that. It usually takes a while for the phones to turn on and turn off. Mike Blumenthal, are you still on?
Oh, hey, there. I'm unmuted now.
You're good. Yes.
Okay, this is Craig.
I'm still here, Michael. Michael, I'm still here too. Go ahead, Craig.
All right. I was just commenting because when we moved recently to SharePoint 2013, we're a little bit behind. There were so many things that people wanted to be able to do with their SharePoint, but just couldn't. Meaning getting data from other systems, making web services calls, and connecting systems together, basically. And this allows non-developers the ability to go and retrieve data not only from SharePoint itself, but also any other system that has a REST API, and then consume that data in the workflow and do whatever you want with it. So it was really just an amazing change for us because it opened up a lot of doors.
That's exciting to hear, Craig. You said you're with AT&T or consulting for AT&T?
No, I'm an employee there.
Employee. Where are you guys at?
In the Schaumburg area.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, we're excited. We hope that you're going to come on, be back again in May for that one, when we jump back into the SharePoint framework, the idea being that we're all going to be building actual apps using that new model in the SharePoint framework model. So we're going to be trying to dive into the API that you've been describing to the rest of the members here. We did some of that a month ago, and we tried to get into it today. It just got a little busy that we had to go back to some other topics that were easier to prepare. But next month and for the foreseeable future, there's going to be a significant focus on the SharePoint framework. We are going to be pushing that plus Power Apps to their absolute limits all through the summer, so that we are the sharpest group in the area for using these technologies.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other half of the revolution that I mentioned, it was that we started to learn what you're presenting here, like what are all these variables? What is all this stuff? Where does it come from? The stuff that you just showed. And it opened up a lot of people's eyes to, hey, wait, we can not only do this in a workflow, but we can just do it with Ajax on a page. We can and enable a lot of people to start exploring the JavaScript side of things. So anyway, I'll go back on mute.
I like everything about that, Craig. What kind of challenges do you guys think that you're going to be facing? When you talked about, we want to get into SharePoint, are there any particular things that you guys were specifically trying to get into?
Just corporate data, really. I mean, you want to be able to consume corporate data, and it was always very, very difficult to create external content types and try to connect to SQL databases. Our environment is a huge shared environment. I've been told it's the world's largest SharePoint deployment. I don't know if that's true, but so there was not a lot of actual connections allowed to other databases and other systems. So being able to make the web services call opened that up for a lot of people.
Fantastic. Yeah. Like I said, that's what we're going to be trying to focus on as a users group, is opening up not the floodgate, but developing expertise and sharing that with the members over the next couple of months. Power Apps, Power BI, and the SharePoint framework. to start building those next generation applications and business solutions. First and foremost, to try solving new problems. But secondly, and Michael mentioned this quite well at the beginning today, there's a whole host of now, there used to be legacy apps that we transformed into SharePoint apps. Now there's actually legacy SharePoint apps that need to be brought up to speed and recreated in the new technologies that are going to be supported going forward. Meaning InfoPath is going, SharePoint Designer is going. We have to find a way to create, going forward supported type of solutions based on the technologies that are here. Anything else from everybody? Otherwise, it's going to be, I think we're going to declare this session to be over. Thanks,
Mark?
everybody.
Mark?
Yeah, Elizabeth.
Actually, I sent you a comment that somebody sent in, but they're on mute. If you can take a look at that and let me know if you just need me to kind of read through it if you're unable to pull it in your chat window.
Oh, yeah, they're reading. Shall I read it verbatim and then try to answer it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure. One of the members is asking, I'm comparing SharePoint Designer workflows with Nintex workflows. I see a few action items were required. They're missing, for example, processing.xml documents. Do you know, is there any plan by Microsoft to incorporate such actions in SharePoint Designer 2013, or let's say in the future? Wow, I think Michael kind of answered that question. SharePoint Designer, the code base is kind of stagnant. Whatever they put into the 2013 in that web call was probably their best pitch. And they're looking to put their effort and their energy and their finances into other technologies, almost exclusively the SharePoint framework. That is their number one focus, is trying to make everybody understand the APIs that are available through the SharePoint framework to build their own workflow solutions, so that they can actually lose the tools that are exclusive, that are specific, that are particular to Microsoft, like InfoPath, like SharePoint Designer. They want to become, and this is my interpretation, Mike, Craig, everybody, feel free to offer up. Microsoft's trying to get away from the Microsoft-only tool set and use what everybody else is using through the APIs that are now going to be available.
So I'm going to agree with most of that. I think that Microsoft is still looking to promote some of their first-party tools, but their first-party tools are now things like Power Apps and Flow. You were right on the money about SharePoint Designer not getting any new investment. It will never get new features at this point. But in terms of calling that web service API, the Flow does have an ability to make it an HTTP request. So we could potentially call that API from Flow. Although of course Flow only works in SharePoint Online at this point and not on premise. The question of Nintex versus Flow, I think, is a very interesting one, and is one that I'm very interested in. I'm just starting to ramp up on Flow and Power Apps, and what I'm seeing is that out of the box, it looks like Flow doesn't have any canned actions for creating a site or creating a site collection, whereas Nintex does. Nintex has literally years of head start on Flow. However, Microsoft is bigger than Nintex, and so the never bet against the gorilla in the room, and so we'll see that Flow is improving monthly, and so I think it's just a matter of time before some of these things come to Flow. But again, if you see something missing, see something you'd like to have in Flow, use the user voice for Flow to voice those things and get other people to vote up your suggestions, because that's what the Flow team will be looking at when they make improvements. And as you go and pick triggers and actions, you'll see that in the dialog box for that, Microsoft says, tell us what you want.
That's actually a great suggestion, Mike, for us to continue using the voice to guide where these new technologies are actually going to, where the new functionality is going to come first. They're really responding to it. You see it in all their YouTube videos. They're saying, hey, tell us where to go. Tell us what you want. On the bottom of every single app that they're giving on the new SharePoint app, is a button that says, how do you like it? Tell us what you want. Microsoft is craving that kind of feedback. And if we don't give it, then we're going to be subject to their next best guess. But our feedback is way better than any guess that Microsoft makes, so let's be giving them that feedback. Are there any other chats, any other comments before we adjourn for today?
Yeah, so basically the only thing is Ralph had to go, but what he wanted to recommend is that it'd be great to be able to continue these conversations and comments in the meetup group as well. So definitely keep that going in our meetup group.
Fantastic suggestion. Let's everybody do that. You're going to see a little bit more surveys and polls, a little bit more interaction in that meetup group as well. Thanks everybody for staying so long. I appreciate it. We'll see you in May. This is Mark signing off.